In my 6 weeks here, 4 hikers have vanished. The official reports say they got lost. I know better now. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm 31 years old. 6 weeks ago, I drove up a winding mountain road toward a ranger station in the North Cascades that would change everything I thought I understood about the world. The GPS on my phone died exactly at mile marker 47, right where the paved road turned to gravel. I should have taken that as a warning. I used to be a Seattle police officer. For 8 years, I walked those rainy streets, responded to domestics, broke up bar fights, did the work. Then 18 months ago, my partner Danny took 3 bullets during what should have been a routine traffic stop. I held him while we waited for the ambulance, watched the light go out of his eyes, and something in me broke that night. Started drinking too much. Started showing up late. Started not caring whether I made it home. My wife Emily left me 11 months ago. Can't blame her. I become someone else, someone she didn't recognize. The divorce finalized 2 months back, and I sat in my apartment looking at the papers, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. That's when I saw the job posting. Remote ranger position, North Cascades National Park, minimal human contact, 6-month rotation. It felt like exactly what I needed. Isolation. Silence. A chance to figure out who Jake Morrison was supposed to be without the uniform, without Emily, without Danny's ghost following me around. I had the qualifications: wilderness training from my time in the Army Reserve, EMT certified, search and rescue experience from volunteer work. They hired me over the phone after a 20-minute interview. The HR woman sounded relieved, almost desperate. I thought that was just because it was hard to fill remote positions. Now I know better. The drive took 3 hours from Marblemount, the last real town. The road climbed through old-growth forest, Douglas fir and western hemlock so thick they blocked out the afternoon sun. I passed an abandoned fire lookout tower about 2 hours in, its windows broken out, door hanging off the hinges. Something about it made my skin crawl, the way it leaned slightly, like it was watching the road. I stopped for gas in a place that barely qualified as a settlement. Just a combination gas station and general store with a faded sign that read, Marv's. The woman behind the counter was maybe 60, weathered skin, sharp eyes. She glanced at my Park Service jacket when I came in to pay. "You headed up to Cascade Station?" she asked. "Yeah, starting today." She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Pity maybe, or concern. "You're the new one. Good luck lasting longer than the last guy." I tried to laugh it off. "That bad up there?" She didn't smile back. "Just, be careful, listen to what they tell you. Some of us have lived in these mountains our whole lives, we know." I paid for the gas and left, unsettled but telling myself she was just a local trying to spook the outsider. Every remote area has its superstitions, its local legends meant to scare tourists. I dealt with enough weird situations as a cop that I figured I could handle whatever the mountains threw at me. The last hour of the drive was the worst. The road became barely passable, full of potholes and washouts. My truck bounced over ruts that looked like they hadn't been graded in months. The forest pressed in close on both sides, creating a tunnel of green that grew darker as the sun dropped toward the western ridgeline. Then I came around a bend, and there it was, Cascade Station. It sat in a clearing maybe 200 yards across, surrounded by forest on 3 sides and backed up against a steep ridge. The building itself looked solid, a modern prefab structure with solar panels on the roof and a weather station tower rising from one corner. A truck was parked out front, Park Service green. The windows glowed with warm light. But something felt wrong about it. I couldn't put my finger on what. The clearing was too quiet maybe, or the way the shadows fell from the tree line like they were reaching toward the station. I sat in my truck for a moment, engine idling, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. I grabbed my duffel bag and headed for the door. It opened before I could knock. The woman standing there looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Maybe 45, Asian features, short black hair shot through with gray. Her eyes had dark circles so pronounced they looked like bruises. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the door. "You must be Morrison," she said. Her voice was hoarse, strained. "I'm Sarah Chen. Come in quickly. Sun's getting low." I stepped inside. The station was well maintained, almost obsessively clean. Modern equipment lined one wall, computer monitors, a satellite phone setup, weather tracking instruments. A kitchen area occupied the back, and I could see doors leading to what I assumed were bedrooms and storage. But what caught my attention was the coffee mug on the desk. It was half full, the coffee dried to a dark ring around the inside, like someone had set it down weeks ago and never picked it back up. Sarah saw me looking at it. "That was David's, the ranger before me. He left in a hurry." "How long have you been here?" I asked. "4 months. I was supposed to stay 6, but—" She trailed off, started moving around the room, packing items into a backpack with jerky, frantic movements. "They're offering me a transfer. I'm taking it." I noticed she kept glancing at the windows, even though it was still light outside. Her movements were those of someone barely holding it together, someone on the edge. "Sarah, what's going on? The woman at the gas station said something about not lasting. What happened to David?" She stopped packing and turned to face me. In the light, I could see a scar on her left forearm, 3 parallel lines that looked like claw marks. "David lasted 3 weeks. The guy before him made it 2 months. I'm one of the longest recent rotations." She walked to a desk drawer, pulled out a key, and unlocked it. From inside, she removed a laminated card. "These aren't guidelines, Jake. They're survival." She handed me the card. It was covered in handwriting, multiple colors of ink, like different people had added to it over time. 7 rules, numbered clearly. Rule 1. Never investigate the lights on Eagle Peak between 2 and 4 a.m. Stay inside. Close all curtains. Rule 2. If you hear someone calling your name from the forest after dark, do not respond, even if it sounds like someone you know, especially then. Rule 3. The trail to Mirror Lake closes at sunset. If you find hikers there after dark, do not bring them back to the station. Direct them to descend immediately. Rule 4. Every morning at 6 a.m., check the rain gauge. If it reads exactly 7.77 inches regardless of actual weather, call HQ on satellite phone and say code Vermilion. Wait for further instructions. Do not leave the station that day. Rule 5. If you encounter a hiker wearing all white, including white boots, do not ask them questions. Give them whatever they request and let them pass. Rule 6. The equipment shed locks from the outside only. Never go inside after 8 p.m. If you hear tapping from inside, ignore it. Rule 7. The 7th rule was partially illegible, water damaged. I could make out fragments. Something about children's voices, something about never being alone, something about before dawn. I looked up at Sarah, trying to keep my expression neutral. Is this some kind of ranger tradition, hazing the new guy? Her hand shot out and grabbed my arm, gripping hard enough to hurt. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw real fear there, the kind I'd seen in witnesses to violent crimes, in people who'd stared into the dark and seen something staring back. "I broke Rule 2, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Once, just once, I heard my daughter calling for help, crying, screaming that she was hurt. My daughter is in Boston, Jake, safe in her apartment 3,000 miles away, but I heard her voice. I know my own daughter's voice." She released my arm and pulled up her sleeve, showing me the scars more clearly. 3 parallel gouges, the kind of marks that could only come from something with claws. That happened through my jacket, through a heavy canvas field jacket. I didn't open the door, didn't go outside, but I answered. I called out to her, and something answered back in her voice, but the words— She shook her head. The words weren't right. They weren't human words, just sounds arranged to seem like them. That's when I heard the scratching at the door. When I looked through the window the next morning, these marks were on my arm, through the jacket, through my shirt, into my skin. I never felt it happen. I felt cold despite the warmth of the station. Sarah, that doesn't make sense. I know, she handed me the laminated card. I don't care if you believe me right now. You will, just promise me you'll follow the rules, all of them, exactly as written. She grabbed her backpack, already packed, and headed for the door. Her truck keys were in her hand. I noticed her truck outside had been parked facing out, like she'd planned for a quick escape. Wait, you're leaving right now. You're supposed to brief me, show me the protocols. Everything you need is in the filing cabinets. Trail maps, emergency procedures, HQ contact info. Monica is your dispatcher. She works days. She's good people. Sarah opened the door and I felt the temperature drop as mountain air flowed in. The rules are what matter, not the bureaucratic stuff. The rules. At least stay until morning. It's almost dark. She actually laughed, a brittle, broken sound. Especially not until morning. I need to be off this mountain before sunset. I've pushed my luck far enough. She walked to her truck, threw her pack in the passenger seat, and started the engine. I followed her out, standing in the clearing as the light faded from gold to orange to purple. Sarah, come on, what am I supposed to? She rolled down her window. In the dying light, her face looked 10 years older than when I'd arrived. You'll understand soon enough. First night's usually quiet. They like to watch first, learn about you. Just stay inside after dark. Check the rain gauge at 6 a.m. Follow the rules. Her tires threw gravel as she accelerated out of the clearing. I watched her taillights disappear down the road, and then I was alone. Completely alone, miles from the nearest human being, with night falling over the Cascade Mountains. The forest around me was silent. Not peaceful quiet, but the absence of sound, like something had muted the normal evening chorus of birds and insects. I looked toward the ridgeline to the east. Eagle Peak, I assumed, a dark pyramid against the darkening sky. I went back inside and locked the door. The station suddenly felt very small, very isolated. I picked up the laminated card and read the rules again, trying to find some rational explanation. Hazing, local superstition, inside joke among rangers. But I kept seeing Sarah's eyes, the genuine terror there, and those scars. I walked through the station, checking each room. 6 rooms total, main office area, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, bathroom, and storage. Everything was clean, organized, well-maintained. The generator hummed in its shed outside. Radio equipment blinked and chirped. Weather station recorded wind speed and temperature. Everything normal, everything rational. I found a filing cabinet in the corner and started pulling files. Personnel records for the station going back 5 years. I counted the names. 14 different rangers. Some stayed a few weeks, some a few months. The longest recent rotation besides Sarah was 4 months. Before that, you had to go back to 2019 to find someone who completed a full 6-month assignment. The turnover was insane. No workplace had that kind of turnover unless something was seriously wrong. In the back of one drawer, I found a photograph pinned to a folder. A group photo from 1998, 7 rangers standing in front of the station. Someone had taken a black marker and scratched out 3 of the faces, violent scribbles that tore through the photo paper. I put the photo back and closed the drawer. Outside, full darkness had fallen. The temperature was dropping fast. I checked the thermometer, 48 degrees and falling. I made myself dinner from the supplies in the kitchen. Heated up some soup, made a sandwich, forced myself to eat even though I wasn't hungry. Checked the satellite phone, made sure it was charged. Found a flare gun in a cabinet marked emergency use only. The clock read 8:47 p.m. I sat at the desk and looked at the rules again. My eyes kept going to Rule 2. If you hear someone calling your name from the forest after dark, do not respond. Even if it sounds like someone you know. Especially then. The wind picked up outside, making the walls creak. I thought I heard something else under the wind. A voice, maybe, distant, calling. I turned on the radio, found a station playing old country music, and turned it up loud enough to drown out whatever I thought I'd heard. The forest was dark beyond the windows. Anything could be out there. Everything could be out there. I didn't sleep that first night. Just sat in the chair, flare gun on the desk next to me, watching the windows and telling myself that Sarah had experienced some kind of breakdown, that isolation did things to people, that there was a rational explanation for everything. But deep down, in the part of me that used to be a cop, the part that learned to trust instinct over logic, I knew she was telling the truth. Something was wrong with this place, something old and patient and hungry. And I just agreed to spend 6 months here. The first real light came at 6:03 a.m. I'd been watching the windows for hours, jumping at every sound, every creak of the building settling in the cold. But when dawn finally broke over the eastern ridge, painting the forest in shades of gold and amber, everything looked different. Beautiful, even, peaceful. I stepped outside for the first time since Sarah had driven away. The air was crisp and clean, sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. Mist hung in the low spots, burning off as the sun climbed higher. Birds sang their morning songs. A deer watched me from the edge of the clearing, curious but unafraid, before bounding back into the trees. In the daylight, my fears from the night before seemed absurd. This was just wilderness. Beautiful, isolated wilderness. The kind of place people paid good money to visit. I remembered Rule 4 and walked to the weather station. The rain gauge read 0.3 inches. Normal. Just rainfall from the storm system that had passed through 2 days ago, according to the logs. I went back inside and made coffee, strong and black. The satellite phone had a direct line to HQ, and I figured I should check in. Let them know I'd arrived, that Sarah had departed. A woman answered on the second ring. "Cascade Station, this is Monica, that you Jake." Her voice was warm, friendly, motherly almost. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. "Yeah, it's me. Made it in yesterday evening." Sarah headed out right away. "I know, honey." She called when she hit Marblemount, said she was continuing straight through to Seattle. Sounded relieved. Monica paused. "How was your first night?" "Quiet," I lied. "Getting oriented. Lot of equipment to familiarize myself with." "You'll do fine. You've got good experience, better than most we get for that posting. Just follow the protocols, do your trail checks, keep us updated on weather. Pretty straightforward." I looked at the laminated rule card on the desk. "Monica, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What's the deal with the rules? The one Sarah left me?" The line went quiet for a long moment. When Monica spoke again, her voice had changed. Still kind, but more serious, more careful. "Jake, I've been dispatching for the Park Service for 22 years. Worked with rangers all over Washington, Oregon, Northern California. Every station has its quirks, its local knowledge that gets passed down. Cascade Station has those rules. They've been there longer than I have. All I can tell you is that every ranger who's followed them has come back safe. The ones who didn't," she trailed off. "Didn't what?" "Just follow them, Jake, please. They exist for a reason." After we hung up, I spent the morning exploring the station more thoroughly. Found detailed trail maps covering 200 square miles of wilderness. Emergency supply caches marked at various locations. Communication protocols. Weather monitoring procedures. It was all very professional, very bureaucratic, very normal. Except for the rules. I found more evidence in the storage room. A journal, hidden behind some old equipment manuals. The name inside read Tom Patterson, dated 2022. I started reading. The entries began normally enough. Tom describing his daily routines, trail maintenance, wildlife observations. But around August 15th, the tone changed. "Rule 1 exists for a reason. I watched the lights anyway just for a minute. Told myself I needed to document them in case they were some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. They weren't aurora. They moved with purpose, deliberate patterns, and there were shapes up there moving between the lights. Not human shapes. Too tall, too thin, moving in ways that didn't follow normal physics. August 29th. I keep hearing Sarah's voice, but Sarah transferred out 3 weeks ago. I know she's gone. I watched her leave. So why do I hear her calling my name every night around 2 a.m.? Why does she know things only Sarah would know, personal things we talked about? September 3rd, the final entry. I'm leaving. Whatever is up on Eagle Peak, it's coming down. Last night it was at the tree line, just standing there watching the station. I could see it in the moonlight. 7 feet tall at least, proportions all wrong. When I shined my flashlight at it, the light just seemed to slide off like it couldn't quite touch whatever it was. I'm not paid enough for this. I'm not equipped for this. Whoever comes next, follow the rules. Don't be curious like me. Curiosity will kill you here. The rest of the pages had been torn out. I set the journal down, hands shaking slightly. The rational part of my brain insisted this was hysteria, isolation-induced paranoia. But I'd seen genuine fear before. I'd read enough witness statements to know when someone was lying and when they were reporting what they truly believed happened. Tom Patterson believed what he wrote, so did Sarah Chen. I kept searching and found a box of old newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. Someone had collected them, filed them carefully. Entire survey team vanishes on Eagle Peak from 1952. 6 men went up to map the area. 3 came back. They claimed the other 3 walked into the light and disappeared. They were found days later, miles apart, with no memory of what happened. Search called off for missing hikers from 1978. A group of 4 experienced backpackers. Last seen heading toward Mirror Lake. Never found. Search teams reported unusual conditions and equipment malfunctions in the area. Ranger found dead, exposure despite adequate gear, from 1999. A ranger named Michael Reeves found frozen to death inside the equipment shed. It was July. Temperature that night was 65 degrees. The pattern was clear. Something was wrong with this area, had been wrong for a long time. I found one more document, a consultation report from 2001. The Park Service had brought in a Yakama elder, trying to get information about local traditions, sacred sites, anything that might explain the disappearances. The elder had refused to enter the Cascade Station area. According to the report, he called it a wrong place, where the barriers are thin, where things cross over that should not cross. He'd performed a blessing at the boundary of the territory and then left, declining any payment. The report ended with a note from the superintendent. Local indigenous knowledge does not provide actionable information. Recommend continued standard safety protocols. Standard protocols. Right. Like the rules weren't a tacit admission that something here didn't follow standard anything. I spent the afternoon doing actual ranger work, trying to ground myself in normalcy. Checked the trails in the immediate vicinity, cleared some deadfall from the path to Mirror Lake, made notes on trail conditions. The weather was perfect, crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that makes you understand why people move to the Pacific Northwest. I encountered actual people for the first time. A family of 4 on the Mirror Lake Trail, mom and dad and 2 kids, maybe 10 and 12. Friendly, excited to be in the wilderness, asking me about wildlife and trail conditions. "You'll want to be back at the trailhead before sunset," I told them. "Trail officially closes then." The dad checked his watch. "We've got 3 hours, plenty of time." I thought about Rule 3 but didn't mention it. What was I supposed to say? Don't be near the lake after dark because something bad might happen. They'd think I was crazy. Instead I said, just be careful. Cell phones don't work out here and it gets dark fast in the mountains. Easy to lose the trail. They promised to be careful and hiked on. I watched them go, hoping they'd take my advice seriously. I also passed a college-age couple, early 20s, with fancy REI gear that looked barely used. They were arguing about which trail to take. I gave them a map, showed them the easier route, and reminded them about trail hours. The guy waved me off. "We're experienced. We've got permits. We know what we're doing." Sure they did. I'd seen that type before. Watched too many YouTube videos, bought all the gear, thought that made them experts. I hiked back to the station as the sun dropped toward the western peaks. Got inside by 5:30 p.m., well before dark. Made dinner, did some paperwork, checked the weather forecast. Storm system expected in 3 days, possible early season snow above 7,000 feet. Everything normal, everything routine. At 11:47 p.m., I was reading an old paperback I'd found on the shelf when I heard it. Jake, you out here?" The voice was so clear, so close, that for a second I thought someone was actually outside. Then my blood ran cold. It was Danny's voice, my dead partner, the man I'd buried 18 months ago. I froze, the book sliding from my hands onto the floor. "Jake, man, I'm hurt. I can't find my car. Need some help here, buddy." The voice had Danny's slight Boston accent, the way he always said "buddy" when he was trying to stay calm. It was perfect. Exactly right. My hand moved toward the door handle without conscious thought. Danny needed help. My partner needed me. Then I saw the laminated rule card on the desk. Rule 2. If you hear someone calling your name from the forest after dark, do not respond, even if it sounds like someone you know, especially then. I jerked my hand back from the door like it was hot. "Come on, partner, you'd really leave me out here." The voice moved around the perimeter of the station. I could track it by sound, circling the building. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't real. Danny was dead. I'd identified his body at the morgue. I'd given his badge to his mother at the funeral. But the voice was so perfect. "Remember that night at Murphy's bar? You told me about Emily leaving. I told you it would be okay, that you'd get through it. I'm here for you again, man. Just open the door." I bit down on my knuckle hard enough to taste blood. Tears were streaming down my face. I wanted so badly to believe, to open that door, to see my friend again. The voice continued for 20 minutes, saying things only Danny would know. Cases we'd worked, jokes we'd shared, personal details from years of partnership. Then it made a mistake. "Remember when you told me about the divorce, how hard it was?" My blood turned to ice. Danny died in May. Emily left me in August. Danny never knew about the divorce. He'd been dead 3 months when it happened. "Jack, why won't you play with us?" The voice changed. The pitch dropped an octave, took on a guttural quality that didn't sound human anymore. Something between a growl and a whisper, words stretched and distorted. I backed away from the door, grabbing the flare gun from the desk. Then it stopped, just cut off mid-word, replaced by total silence. No wind, no insects, nothing. I didn't move for 30 minutes, just stood there with the flare gun, watching the door. At dawn, I finally worked up the courage to check outside. There were no footprints in the dew that covered the ground. But on the window frame, the wood showed 3 deep parallel gouges, fresh splinters pale against the weathered gray. The same pattern as Sarah's scars. I went back inside and made coffee with shaking hands. Then I called HQ. Monica answered. "Morning, Jake, you're up early." "Just checking in," I managed. "Everything's fine here." "Good to hear. Weather's supposed to hold for a few more days. Enjoy it while you can." After I hung up, I sat at the desk and picked up the rule card. Read it again. Memorized every word. I'd been here 5 days. Sarah had lasted 4 months. Tom Patterson made it 3 weeks. I thought about that college couple, so confident, so sure they knew what they were doing. Thought about the family with the kids. This wasn't just about me surviving. It was about keeping hikers safe, even if they didn't know what they needed to be safe from. I set multiple alarms on my watch for 5:55 a.m. Couldn't miss that rain gauge check. Put the satellite phone on the charger, made sure it was topped off. Found a headlamp and fresh batteries. Located all the flashlights, tested them. Prepared as much as anyone could prepare for something they didn't understand. Day 7, I started to believe I might make it. Started to develop a routine, a rhythm. Days were safe. Days were normal. Just wilderness, just work, just solitude. Nights were different. But if I followed the rules exactly, nights were survivable. The question was how long I could keep following them without making a mistake. On day 12, I woke to my alarm at 5:55 a.m. and stumbled outside in the pre-dawn cold. My breath misted in the air. The thermometer read 34 degrees, just above freezing despite being mid-September. I walked to the weather station, yawning, checking the rain gauge out of habit more than concern. The sky had been clear for 4 days. No precipitation at all. The gauge read 7.77 inches. I stared at it, certain I was misreading in the dim light. I pulled out my flashlight and checked again. 7.77 inches exactly. My hands started shaking. The sky above was perfectly clear, stars still visible in the west. There hadn't been a single drop of rain. I ran back inside and grabbed the satellite phone, nearly dropping it twice as I fumbled with the buttons. A man answered this time, not Monica. His voice was flat, professional. Cascade Station, go ahead. This is Jake Morrison, code Vermilion. The words felt strange in my mouth. There was a pause. I heard typing in the background. Confirmed, Cascade Station. Remain inside the facility. All patrols are canceled for today. Report status every 2 hours via satellite phone. Do you understand? Yes, but what does this mean? What? Every 2 hours, Morrison. First check at 0800 hours. HQ out. The line went dead. I set the phone down and looked out the window. Everything appeared normal. Forest, mountains, morning light beginning to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. I made coffee, tried to eat breakfast, couldn't manage more than a few bites. Checked the time, 6:22 a.m. Hour and a half until my first check-in. At 8 a.m. exactly, I called HQ. Monica was back on duty. Cascade Station, status check. I'm secure inside the building. Everything looks normal from the windows. What's happening, Monica? Just maintain position, honey. Has this situation occurred before? I thought about the files, the journals. I don't know, maybe. The previous rangers didn't document this specifically. Well, you're doing fine. Just stay inside like the protocols say. We'll get through this together. Her voice was reassuring, but I could hear the tension underneath. At 8:15 a.m., the deer arrived. A whole herd of them, maybe 20, moving through the clearing. They weren't grazing or moving with their normal careful wariness. They were running, flat-out sprinting, crashing through brush without concern for noise or obstacles. All heading away from Eagle Peak. At 10 a.m., fog rolled in. But it wasn't normal fog. It was too dense, too uniform, like someone had poured concrete smoke into the valley. Within minutes, I couldn't see 10 feet beyond the windows. The temperature inside the station dropped 5 degrees in 10 minutes, despite the heater running full blast. At noon, I heard them. Footsteps, multiple sets moving around the perimeter of the station. Not the soft pad of deer hooves or the scuttle of small animals. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, bipedal. They circled the building, maintaining perfect spacing like a patrol. I counted at least 6 different sets by the rhythm. Then the scratching started. Not frantic clawing, but methodical testing. Something was running claws or fingers along the walls, the windows, the door. Testing for weaknesses, for gaps, for ways inside. I grabbed the flare gun and backed into the center of the main room, trying to watch all the windows at once. At 2 p.m., the scratching stopped and the tapping began. The same rhythm from Rule 6, the one about the equipment shed. Tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 pause. It came from every side of the building simultaneously, coordinated, intelligent. I called HQ, my voice shaking. I'm hearing. There are sounds outside, movement, multiple. Maintain position, Monica interrupted, her professional calm cracking slightly. Do not investigate. Do not go outside. Do not open any doors or windows. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. What are they? Focus on staying safe, Jake. We're monitoring the situation. At 4 p.m., the fog started to lift. The sounds faded. The temperature slowly climbed back to normal. By 4:47 p.m., the fog was completely gone. Evening sunlight slanted through the trees, golden and peaceful. I could hear birds again, normal forest sounds returning. I checked the perimeter from the windows. No tracks visible in the dirt. No evidence that anything had been there at all. Except the rain gauge, now read 0.0 inches. HQ called me at 5 p.m. Code Vermilion has concluded. You may resume normal operations tomorrow. Good work maintaining protocols, Morrison. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Instead, I just said, understood. That night, I sat at the desk and searched online for any reference to Code Vermilion. Found old alchemical texts mentioning red mercury, supernatural associations, boundaries between worlds. Nothing definitive, nothing helpful. I thought about Rule 3, about Mirror Lake, about that confident college couple I'd seen on the trail days ago. Wondered if they'd made it out okay. The next morning, I hiked out to Mirror Lake for a routine check. It was a beautiful hike, 4 miles of well-maintained trail through old-growth forest. The lake itself was stunning, a perfect alpine tarn reflecting the surrounding peaks like a mirror, which was probably how it got its name. I was heading back at 6:45 p.m., cutting it close but still an hour before sunset when I heard voices ahead. Raised voices arguing. I came around a bend and found them. The couple from before, the ones with all the fancy gear. They'd set up a camp right at the lake shore. Excuse me, I called out. Trail closes at sunset. You need to pack up and head down. The guy looked up annoyed. We've got permits. We're allowed to backcountry camp. Not here, not at this lake. It's in the regulations. Mirror Lake area is day use only. The girlfriend checked her phone, even though there was no signal. We hiked all this way. We're not going back down in the dark. I thought about Rule 3, about not bringing anyone back to the station after dark. You need to descend immediately. Different trail, not the one to Cascade Station. The south trail down to Thunder Creek. You can make it before full dark if you leave right now. Or what? The guy stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate me. He had 4 inches on me, but I dealt with drunk guys twice his size in my cop days. You going to arrest us? No, but I am telling you that people have died in this area for ignoring safety warnings. Multiple people. This isn't a suggestion. Something in my voice must have gotten through because the girlfriend started packing up her stuff. Come on, Tyler, let's just go. I don't like it here anyway. It's too quiet. She was right. The forest around the lake was dead silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Tyler grumbled but helped her pack. I watched them gather their gear, making sure they actually left, pointed them to the south trail. Stay on the marked path. Don't stop until you reach Thunder Creek Campground. And for God's sake, if you hear anything calling to you, don't answer. The girlfriend gave me a strange look. What? Just be safe, move quickly. I watched them disappear down the trail, then hiked back to the station as fast as I could. Got inside just as the sun touched the western ridgeline. I didn't hear anything from them that night. Checked with HQ the next morning. Monica, did anyone report contact with a couple camping near Mirror Lake? Tyler and his girlfriend, early 20s, Pretty sure they're from California based on their gear. Let me check the incident reports. Pause, typing sounds. Oh, yeah. Search and rescue got a call yesterday from Thunder Creek. Couple came stumbling into the campground just after dark, completely disoriented. They'd been at Mirror Lake. Are they okay? Physically, yes. Mentally, the report says they're pretty shaken up. Claim they heard voices from the water after sunset, multiple voices, all calling their names. They said the voices knew things about them, personal things. They packed up and ran. Got lost, nearly fell off a ridge in the dark. They're demanding to speak to a supervisor, threatening to sue because we allow dangerous wildlife in the area. Wildlife. That's what they think it was. Some kind of predator, maybe. They'll calm down once they get home and process it. We've seen it before. I bet they had. I thought about Rule 3, about how I'd almost brought them back to the station because that was the normal thing to do, the helpful thing. But the rule said not to. The rule said direct them away, make them descend a different route. The couple had survived because I'd followed the rule exactly. How many people hadn't survived because a ranger tried to help them the normal way? I pulled out the rule card and read it again. Each rule had been learned through experience. Each rule represented someone who discovered the hard way what happened when you broke it. Some of them had survived to write it down. Some of them hadn't. I was starting to understand that these weren't superstitions or pranks. These were survival protocols, discovered through trial and error, refined through tragedy. And if I wanted to make it 6 months, I needed to follow them exactly. No exceptions, no creativity, no thinking I knew better. The rules worked, as long as I didn't break them. By day 20, I'd settled into a routine. Wake at 5:55, check the rain gauge, call into HQ, spend the day on trail maintenance or patrol, get back before dark, lock down for the night. Follow the rules. Survive. I'd stopped feeling like I was going crazy. Started accepting that this place operated under different laws than the rest of the world. Started trusting the rules more than my own instincts. That was when things got worse. Day 22, I was patrolling the northern boundary, checking trail markers and clearing deadfall. Beautiful clear day, temperature in the low 50s, perfect hiking weather. I'd been out since 8 a.m., working my way along a 10-mile loop. Around 4 p.m., I started heading back, giving myself plenty of time to reach the station before dark. The trail wound through a thick stand of old-growth cedar, trees so massive they'd been saplings when Columbus landed in the Americas. That's when I heard it. Singing, a child's voice, high and sweet, singing a melody I didn't recognize. The language wasn't English, wasn't any language I'd ever heard. Every instinct I had screamed at me to investigate. A lost kid was a priority emergency. Everything else stopped when a child was in danger. But I remembered Rule 7, the one Margaret Voss had completed in her journal, the one that wasn't on the official card. If you hear children's voices singing at dawn, you're not alone in the station. Leave immediately through the east door. Never look back. This wasn't dawn, but it was a child's voice. And something about the singing made my skin crawl, made the hair on my neck stand up. I kept walking, maintaining my pace, not breaking stride. The singing followed me for maybe 200 yards, always the same distance away, never getting closer or farther. Then it stopped abruptly, cut off mid-note. I made it back to the station at 5:30, locked the door, and sat down with shaking hands. That night at 11 p.m., I heard Danny's voice again, but this time it was different. "Hey partner, I know you're in there. I know you can hear me." The voice had Danny's inflections but sounded strained, like it was hard to maintain the mimicry. "I'm not mad that you didn't help me last time, I understand. You were scared. But I'm really here now, Jake. I'm really hurt. I managed to crawl to your station. Please, man, I'm bleeding out here." I sat frozen at the desk. The voice was so convincing. Remember that thing I told you once? About my sister, about what happened when we were kids. I never told anyone else that. Only you. Doesn't that prove it's really me? It did know that story. Danny's sister had died in a car accident when he was 16, and he'd blamed himself because he'd been the one who told her to take that road. He'd shared it with me one late night on patrol, made me promise never to tell anyone. How could this thing know that? Jake, please, I can see the light from your window. I'm right outside. Just open the door, just look. My hand trembled over the door handle. What if it really was Danny somehow? What if this was some second chance, some cosmic do-over, and I was letting my partner bleed out because of some stupid rules? Then I heard something else, under the voice barely audible, a wet clicking sound, like someone speaking through a mouthful of broken glass. The thing outside was working hard to maintain Danny's voice, and it was struggling. Jack, come play, come see your friend. The voice slipped, pitch dropping, words elongating. Whatever was out there couldn't hold the mask anymore. Scratching erupted across the door, violent and frenzied. The handle rattled. Something threw itself against the door hard enough to make the whole frame shudder. Then silence. I waited until dawn to check outside. Found 4 deep gouges in the door, splintered wood, one scratch so deep I could see through to the interior. But no blood, no footprints, no Danny. Day 25 brought a new challenge. I was checking the equipment shed in the afternoon, needed to grab some tools for a bridge repair. The shed was maybe 30 feet from the main station, a smaller building with the same prefab construction. I gathered what I needed and was about to leave when I noticed the time. 7:45 p.m. The sun had set while I was working. I'd lost track of time, stayed out too late. Rule 6 was clear. Never go inside the shed after 8 p.m. I had 15 minutes. I grabbed my tools and headed for the door. That's when I heard it. Tapping from inside the shed, behind me. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. I didn't turn around. Just walked faster, reached the door, stepped outside into the twilight. Locked it from the outside, hands shaking. The tapping continued inside for another 5 minutes, muffled now through the walls, then stopped. I ran back to the main station and locked myself in. What would have happened if I'd stayed past 8 p.m.? If I'd been in there when whatever it was started tapping? I didn't want to know. The next morning, I unlocked the shed and checked inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, tools in place, nothing disturbed. No sign of what had been tapping. Day 28, I had my second code vermilion. I checked the rain gauge at 6 a.m. Perfect clear sky, no precipitation for 6 days. 7.77 inches. I called it in, locked down, prepared for another siege. This time was worse. The fog came at 9 a.m., even thicker than before. I couldn't see the forest at all, just white pressing against the windows like cotton wool. At 10 a.m., something started packing around the station. I could hear footsteps, heavy and deliberate, making a circuit every 3 minutes. One entity walking the perimeter over and over. At noon, it was joined by others. I counted 6 distinct sets of footsteps by their rhythm and weight, all moving in the same direction, clockwise around the building. A patrol pattern. At 2 p.m., they stopped walking and started testing. Windows rattled in their frames. The door handle turned slowly, methodically. Something scraped along the roof, and I heard the metal weather station tower creak and groan. They were examining the building, learning its construction, finding its weak points. I called HQ. Monica answered, her voice tight with stress. "How you holding up, honey?" There are multiple things out there, more than last time. They're working together." "I know, you're doing great, just stay inside. Don't engage. They can't get in as long as you follow protocols." "How do you know that?" Because rangers who have followed the rules have always survived Code Vermilion. It's the ones who panic and run, or try to fight, or break the rules. Those are the ones who don't come back. At 3 p.m., the testing became aggressive. Something hit the north wall hard enough to knock pictures off the desk. Then the south wall, east, west. They were trying to break in. I grabbed the flare gun and crouched in the center of the room, trying to watch all directions at once. Then I heard the voice. My own voice. Jake, it's okay. You can come out now. The fog's clearing. It's safe. It was my voice, but the words were wrong. Too formal, too precise. Like someone had heard me speak but didn't understand the natural rhythm of conversation. Jake Morrison, exit the building. Resume normal duties. No one talked like that, certainly not me. The fog started lifting at 4 p.m. The sounds faded. By 5, everything was silent and clear. The rain gauge read 0.0 inches. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how the entities were evolving, learning. They'd used Danny's voice, then voices from the forest, then my own voice. They were adapting their tactics, trying new approaches. How long before they found something that worked? I spent hours reviewing the rules, the journals, the incident reports, looking for patterns, for weaknesses in the entities, for ways to strengthen my defenses. I found an old report from 1984. A ranger named David Cole had survived 7 Code Vermilion events in 6 months. His notes mentioned that bright light seemed to repel whatever was outside during the events. He'd strung emergency flares around the perimeter during one incident, and the entities had maintained a 50-foot distance from the light. I made a note to test that if it happened again. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. I did my patrols, checked the trails, helped hikers with directions and information. Normal ranger work. But I felt like I was being watched constantly, even in daylight, even in the middle of open clearings. Eyes on me, studying me, learning. Day 31, I met my first hiker in all white. She appeared on the trail to Eagle Lake, coming down as I was going up. Middle-aged woman, maybe 50, wearing white hiking boots, white pants, white jacket, even a white hat. Her skin was so pale it was almost translucent. Rule 5 was explicit. Don't ask questions. Give them whatever they request. She stopped in front of me, and I noticed her eyes were the palest blue I'd ever seen, almost colorless. Water, she said, not a request, a statement. I unhooked my water bottle and handed it to her. She drank the entire thing, a full liter without pausing for breath, then handed it back empty. Thank you. She walked past me down the trail. I turned to watch her go. She cast no shadow. The afternoon sun was bright and clear, but the ground beneath her showed no darkness, no silhouette. I looked away quickly and continued up the trail, forcing myself not to look back. When I reached the lake and returned an hour later, there were no footprints on the trail where she'd walked. The dirt was smooth and undisturbed. That night I added a note to my journal. Encountered white hiker, followed Rule 5, no issues. Short, factual, because I didn't want to think too hard about what I'd seen. Didn't want to think about what might have happened if I'd asked her a question or refused her request. The rules worked. As long as I followed them exactly. As long as I didn't make mistakes. I had 4 more months to go. 4 more months of this. I wasn't sure I'd make it. Day 35, I decided I needed answers. The passive approach, just surviving day to day, wasn't enough anymore. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I started with the filing cabinets, pulling every document, every report, every scrap of paper that might give me information. Laid it all out on the floor of the main room, creating a timeline. The incidents went back further than I'd thought. There was a reference in a 1947 survey report about unusual magnetic anomalies near Eagle Peak. A 1951 memo from the Territorial Forest Service about an unexplained disappearance of a fire watch crew. A 1956 incident report about a ranger who went mad and had to be removed by force, claiming the mountains were speaking to him. But the modern pattern started in 1978. That's when the disappearances became regular, predictable. Every 7 to 12 years, a major incident, and between those peaks, a steady drizzle of smaller events, missing hikers, disoriented campers, rangers who left abruptly. I was looking for connections when I noticed something about the storage room. The dimensions didn't match. From the outside, the building was 40 feet long, but the interior only accounted for 36 feet. 4 feet of space was unaccounted for. I started tapping walls, pulling out storage boxes. In the back corner, behind a stack of old equipment manuals, I found a loose panel. Behind it, a narrow space maybe 2 feet wide, 4 feet deep. And inside that space, a leather journal. The name on the first page read Margaret Voss, 1987. I took it back to the desk and started reading. Margaret had been methodical, scientific even. She documented everything with dates, times, weather conditions. The early entries read like a normal ranger's log: trail maintenance, wildlife observations, visitor interactions. July 15th. First saw the lights on Eagle Peak tonight. Beautiful like aurora but more localized. Unlike any atmospheric phenomenon in my training, we'll monitor and document. July 30th. The lights appear regularly now, always between 2 and 4 a.m. I've tried photographing them, but they don't show up on film. The camera equipment also malfunctions near the peak. Compass readings are erratic. August 3rd. Last night I heard singing from the forest. It wasn't any language I recognized, but it sounded ancient somehow, like the words themselves were older than the trees. I wanted to investigate, but something kept me inside. Instinct, maybe, fear. August 17th. I'm not alone here, I know that now. There's something in these mountains, something that watches and waits. I've seen it at the tree line, just standing there. Too tall to be human, proportions all wrong. When I use my binoculars, the image goes blurry, like it resists being observed clearly. August 30th. I've been talking to Tom, the ranger at Thunder Creek Station. He says every station in this mountain range has its quirks, its unexplained events, but Cascade is different. He showed me rules from his station, guidelines about specific trails and times. We compared them. The rules aren't arbitrary. They're boundaries, contracts maybe. The things here, whatever they are, they follow rules too. They can't break their nature any more than we can. September 5th. I call it the Watcher. It appears most nights now, standing exactly 100 yards from the station, never closer, like there's an invisible line it can't cross, unless invited, unless rules are broken. I'm being careful not to test that theory. September 12th. Saw it clearly tonight through the spotting scope. I wish I hadn't. It's not an animal, not human, something else. Bipedal, yes, but the proportions are wrong. Arms too long, head too smooth. When I try to focus on details, my eyes slide away, can't quite hold the image. It knows I'm watching. It looked directly at me, and even at 100 yards, I felt its attention like a physical weight. September 19. The other rangers at HQ think I'm losing it. I've requested a transfer. I can't stay here after what I saw in Mirror Lake yesterday. There are things in the water, shapes that move under the surface but don't disturb it. They watch anyone who comes to the shore. I understand now why the lake is off limits after dark. The final entry, September 21st. It knows I'm leaving. Last night it spoke for the first time. Not with a voice exactly, but I heard words in my head. It knew my daughter's name. Sarah. How does it know Sarah? I've never mentioned her here, never brought personal photos. But it called her name in her voice, her exact voice from when she was little. I'm getting out tomorrow, first light. Not staying another night. The journal ended there. I stared at the name. Sarah, Margaret's daughter, was named Sarah. Sarah Chen, the ranger who'd handed me the rules. The one who'd lasted 4 months. I pulled out my phone, found the number for HQ, called the main line instead of the satellite phone, asked for personnel records. I need contact information for a former ranger. Margaret Voss worked here in the 80s. The clerk sounded bored. That information isn't typically released, but let me check. Keyboard clicking. Margaret Voss worked Cascade Station 1987, transferred to Olympic National Park, retired in 2019. I can't give you her personal number, but I can pass along a message if it's official business. Please, tell her Jake Morrison at Cascade Station needs to speak with her about safety protocols. It's important. 2 days later, my satellite phone rang at 8 p.m. Unknown number. This is Margaret Voss. Monica said you're at my old station. Her voice was elderly but sharp, suspicious. Yes, ma'am, I found your journal. I need to understand what's happening here. Silence, then a long sigh. You found it, I thought. I hid it well. Didn't want HQ to find it and think I'd lost my mind. Another pause. How long have you been there? 5 weeks. Longer than most lately. You following the rules? Every single one. Good, that's good. What do you want to know? I took a breath. Everything, what are they? Why are they here? How do the rules work? Those are big questions with no good answers. I spent months trying to understand. Researched local indigenous history, geological surveys, everything. Never found a satisfactory explanation. But you learned something. The journal mentioned the Watcher, mentioned they follow rules. Yes, they do have rules, constraints they can't break. I don't know if it's their nature or some older magic or laws we don't understand. But they're bound by patterns, by thresholds, by specific conditions. Just like us. You broke one of the rules, Rule 2. I did. Her voice grew quiet. My daughter Sarah was visiting her father in Portland. I knew she was safe, knew she couldn't be here. But I heard her voice outside the station, heard her crying, calling for mommy. And I answered, I spoke to it. What happened? The thing outside changed. The voice dropped its mask, became something else. It tried the door, tried the windows, left marks. And somehow, even though I never opened the door, never let it in, I woke up the next morning with these scars on my arm. 3 parallel lines like claw marks. Through my jacket, through my shirt, into my skin. I never felt it happen. I looked at my own arms, remembering Sarah Chen's identical scars. Your daughter, Sarah, she became a ranger too. Not my Sarah, different person, but yes, same name. Coincidence probably, or maybe not. Maybe they remember names, track patterns across time, I don't know. The rules on the card, I said. They're not complete. Rule 7 is water damaged. I can tell you what it said. I rewrote it after what I saw. If you hear children's voices singing at dawn, you're not alone in the station. Leave immediately through the east door. Never look back. Don't try to see what's singing. Don't try to help, just go. Has that ever happened? Not in my time, but I found reference to it in older documents from before the station was rebuilt in the 60s. A ranger named Michael Reeves heard children singing one morning. He went looking for them. They found him 3 days later in the equipment shed, dead from exposure. In July, the coroner said he'd frozen to death, but it was 80 degrees outside. I remembered that incident report, 1999. Margaret, why do you think the rules work? What's the mechanism? I think, she paused, gathering her thoughts. I think this place is a boundary between our world and somewhere else. The entities exist in both places, can move between them. But there are laws governing that movement, that interaction. The rules we follow are our side of those laws. When we break them, we give permission, create openings. When we follow them, we maintain the boundary. So the station itself is like a neutral zone. Exactly. As long as we stay inside after dark, follow the protocols, we're safe. The moment we break the rules, the boundary weakens, and they can cross. What do they want? I don't know. I don't think we can understand what they want any more than an ant can understand what we want. They're too different, too other. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're curious. Maybe they just exist, and we're the ones assigning motivation to something beyond our comprehension. We talked for another hour. She told me about other rangers she'd known, other stations with their own rules, their own boundaries. It wasn't just Cascade. It was the whole mountain range, maybe the whole wilderness system. Thin places where the walls between worlds wore thin. Before she hung up, she gave me one more piece of advice. Don't try to understand them, Jake. Don't try to communicate or make peace. Just survive. Follow the rules exactly and you'll be okay. The previous rangers who didn't make it, they all thought they could outsmart the system, or that they could help someone, or that the rules were guidelines instead of absolute law. Learn from their mistakes. One more question. Why did you hide the journal instead of taking it with you? Because I wanted someone to find it. Someone who'd been there long enough to believe it, to understand. If I'd taken it out, if I'd showed it to HQ, they'd have buried it in some file and forgotten about it. But hidden here, it would find the right person at the right time. Someone who needed to know they weren't crazy. That's you, Jake. You're not crazy. This is all real. Every word. After she hung up, I sat in the dark station, thinking about what she'd said. Boundaries between worlds, laws we didn't understand, entities that existed outside normal reality. It should have sounded insane. A month ago it would have. But I'd heard Danny's voice, seen the woman in white with no shadow, survived Code Vermilion twice, heard children singing in languages that predated human civilization. I knew it was real. The question was how to survive the next 4 months. I pulled out my own notebook and started writing. Everything I'd learned, everything I'd experienced, adding my knowledge to the chain, to the legacy of rangers who'd come before. So the next person would know. So the next person would believe. So the next person might survive. Day 42. I'd been at Cascade Station for 6 weeks, felt like 6 years. The routine had become second nature. Wake at 5:55, check the gauge, call HQ, patrol, return before dark, lock down, survive the night, repeat. I'd started to think maybe I had this figured out, started to feel almost confident. That's when they changed tactics. It was 2:47 a.m. when I jolted awake. I hadn't heard anything, hadn't consciously registered a sound, but something had pulled me from sleep. Then I heard her voice. Jake, please, I made a mistake, I need you. Emily, my ex-wife. I sat up in bed, every muscle tensing. Not Danny this time, Emily. I'm pregnant, Jake, it's yours. I lied about the timeline when I left. I need to tell you, I need you to know. I grabbed the edge of the bed frame, knuckles white. The divorce had been 11 months ago. The timeline was possible, just barely possible. I'm scared, I'm alone, please just talk to me. I drove all the way out here to find you. Her voice had that slight stutter on S sounds that she'd always been self-conscious about. The way she said my name, with that little upturn at the end like it was a question. Perfect details, perfect mimicry. I know I hurt you. I know I left when you needed me most, but I'm asking you to give me another chance, to give us another chance, for our baby. I bit down on my knuckle until I tasted blood. Wanted so badly to believe. Wanted to throw open that door and see Emily standing there, see a future where everything broken got fixed, where Danny's death and the divorce and all the pain of the last 2 years could be undone. The voice continued for 20 minutes, saying all the right things, hitting every emotional pressure point with surgical precision. Then it shifted. Jakey, baby, it's so cold out here. My mother's voice. She died 5 years ago from cancer. I'd held her hand in the hospital when she'd taken her last breath. Why won't you help your mother? I'm so cold, honey. Please let me in where it's warm. Tears streamed down my face. She used the pet name only she'd ever called me. Jakey. I'd hated it as a teenager, loved it as an adult, missed it desperately since she died. Then my father, my sister, my best friend from high school, Danny again, every person I'd ever loved, every voice I'd ever trusted. 30 different voices over 90 minutes, rotating through, overlapping sometimes. Each one knowing personal details, private moments, intimate knowledge that only those specific people would have. I collapsed against the wall, hands over my ears, but the voices came through anyway. Then it played its final card. Daddy. A child's voice, young, maybe 5 years old, sweet and innocent and heartbreaking. Daddy, why don't you love me? Why won't you let me in? I don't have children. Emily and I had talked about it, planned for it, but then Danny died and everything fell apart and we never got there. But the voice of the daughter I'd never had, the child that existed only in the life I'd imagined and lost, that was somehow worse than all the others. I'm scared, Daddy. There are things in the dark, please protect me. Something in me broke. You're not real, I screamed. None of you are real. The instant the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. All the voices stopped. Then a single voice spoke, neither male nor female, not quite human. But you answered, you broke silence. The door handle turned violently. Windows rattled in their frames. Something massive hit the exterior wall, and the whole building shook. I grabbed the flare gun and backed into the corner, raising it with shaking hands. The scratching started, wood splintering, nails or claws digging into the door. I could see the door flexing inward under the pressure. I didn't respond to you, I shouted. I stated a fact. I didn't acknowledge you. I didn't invite you. The scratching intensified. The door was going to give way. I could see cracks forming in the wood. Then I remembered Margaret's words. They follow rules. They're bound by laws. Rule 2, I yelled. I didn't respond to you. I spoke about you. There's a difference. The scratching stopped. Silence so complete my ears rang. I stood there, flare gun raised, breathing hard, waiting. Minutes passed, 5, 10, 20. At 5:57 a.m., 3 minutes before my alarm, birds started singing outside. Normal morning sounds returned. I lowered the flare gun and walked to the door on shaking legs. 4 deep gouges in the wood, parallel claw marks, one so deep I could see through to the interior framing, but the door had held. The technicality had saved me. I'd spoken about the entities, not to them. Hadn't acknowledged them directly, hadn't responded to their calls. A technicality, a loophole in rules I didn't fully understand. That's how close I'd come. I called HQ at my scheduled time. Monica answered. Morning, Jake, you okay? You sound rough. Just bad dreams, I'm fine. I wasn't fine, I was falling apart, but I couldn't tell her that, couldn't admit how close I'd come to breaking. That night I wrote in my journal, Rule 2 technicality, speaking about them V's to them. Intent matters, acknowledgement matters, need more data. The next few nights were quiet, too quiet. I spent them reviewing the rules obsessively, looking for other loopholes, other technicalities that might save me. Day 45 brought another test. I was outside at 7:30 p.m., stupidly late. I'd lost track of time while repairing a trail marker. The sun had set 15 minutes earlier, though twilight still lit the sky. I heard footsteps behind me on the trail, heavy, deliberate. I turned and saw it. 7 feet tall at least. Humanoid shape but wrong proportions. Arms too long, hanging past its knees. Head smooth and featureless, like someone had molded clay into the approximation of a human skull but forgotten to add details. It stood 50 yards away at the edge of the clearing. Not moving, not advancing, just watching. I slowly reached for my flashlight, keeping my eyes on the entity, clicked it on. The beam hit the figure and the strangest thing happened. The light seemed to slide off it, unable to quite touch it, like trying to illuminate smoke or shadow. We stood there staring at each other, me with my flashlight, it with its featureless face. Then I remembered the flares, the report from 1984 about bright light repelling them. I pulled a road flare from my pack, struck it, and held it up. The entity stepped backward, just one step but definite movement, away from the light. I started walking toward the station, holding the flare high, keeping my eyes on the thing. It maintained its distance, stepping back as I advanced, staying exactly 50 yards away. I made it to the station door, backed inside, slammed it shut. Looked out the window. The entity was gone. But I'd learned something. Light hurt them somehow, or at least repelled them. Bright, sustained light. I spent the next day stringing emergency flares around the station perimeter, setting up a system where I could light them quickly if needed. Day 48, I tested it. Code vermilion came again, 7.77 inches on a clear day. When the fog rolled in at 9 a.m., I waited until I heard the footsteps circling. Then I lit the flares. Red light blazed around the station, a perimeter of bright chemical fire. The footsteps stopped immediately. I heard movement but farther away. They were maintaining distance from the light. The siege that day was shorter, only 6 hours instead of 8. When the fog cleared at 3 p.m., I found scorch marks in the dirt where the flares had burned, but no tracks, no evidence the entities had breached the light barrier. I called Margaret that night, told her what I'd discovered. "Smart thinking," she said. "David Cole tried something similar in '84. The light doesn't harm them exactly, but it limits them somehow, like it makes the boundary stronger, harder to cross." Why didn't this make it into the official rules? Because HQ doesn't want rangers conducting experiments. They want you to stay inside, follow protocols, minimize risk. Flares are aggressive defense. They'd rather you just hide. Hiding barely works. I know, but it keeps you alive. Sometimes barely alive is enough. After I hung up, I updated my journal with the flare discovery. Added detailed notes on placement, timing, duration. Knowledge was survival. Every piece of information, every observation, every test brought me closer to understanding the rules that govern this place. And understanding the rules meant I might actually survive the next 3.5 months. Day 54, almost 8 weeks. Sarah had lasted 16. I was past the halfway point of her record. The weather forecast called for a major storm system, early season snow possible above 7,000 feet. HQ advised me to hunker down, said the roads might close for a few days. I prepared carefully, generator topped off, supplies checked, flares distributed around the perimeter, satellite phone charged, every window and door sealed tight. The storm hit at 6 p.m. Snow came first, wet heavy flakes that turned the world white. Then wind, gusts strong enough to shake the building. Temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour. By 8 p.m., visibility was zero. The world beyond the windows was just howling white chaos. I should have felt safe. Bad weather meant fewer hikers, less chance of someone breaking the rules and needing rescue. But something felt different, wrong. At 10 p.m., the power went out. Generator kept running, but the lights died anyway. I switched to battery lanterns, their weak glow barely pushing back the darkness. At 10:34, something hit the north wall. Not wind. Too solid, too deliberate. A massive impact that knocked pictures off the desk and made the floor vibrate. Then the south wall, east, west. Boom, 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 boom. Coordinated impacts, circling the building, rhythmic as a heartbeat. I grabbed the flare gun and moved to the center of the room, trying to watch all directions at once. The scratching started, all 4 walls simultaneously, a chorus of claws on wood, on metal, on glass. The sound drilled into my skull, disorienting, maddening. Then the roof, footsteps up there, heavy and numerous, walking back and forth directly overhead. Impossible, Nothing could climb up there in this storm, nothing human. A window cracked, spider web pattern spreading across the glass, something outside applying steady pressure. Then another window cracked, and another. They were trying to break in through multiple points at once. I ran to the storage closet, grabbed every flare I had, lit 3 of them and threw them out into the yard through the door, opening it just long enough to toss them. Red light blazed in the storm, illuminating shapes in the snow. Tall figures, maybe a dozen of them, circling the building. When the light hit them, they retreated slightly, but they didn't leave. The storm was giving them cover, making the light less effective. I slammed the door and locked it again. Midnight, the voices started. All of them at once. Danny, Emily, my mother, my father, my sister, the daughter I never had. Every voice I'd heard before, speaking simultaneously, overlapping, creating a horrible chorus. Words blended together into meaningless sound, into audio static that resonated in my bones. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't coming through my ears anymore. It was in my head, vibrating in my skull. At 1 a.m., my vision started to blur. The temperature inside dropped despite the heater running full blast. My breath frosted in the air. Ice formed on the inside of the windows. I was bleeding from my nose, could taste copper. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the flare gun. This was how they won. Not by breaking the rules, but by breaking me. Physical and mental assault, hour after hour, until I couldn't take any more. At 2 a.m., they brought out the heavy weapons. I started seeing them, inside the station. Danny stood in the corner looking at me with sad eyes. "Why didn't you save me, partner?" Emily sat in the chair by the desk, crying silently. The daughter I never had played with invisible blocks on the floor, humming that same alien melody I'd heard in the forest. I knew they weren't real, knew they were hallucinations, tricks, projections. But I could see them so clearly. "My name is Jake Morrison," I said out loud. "I'm 31 years old. I'm a ranger at Cascade Station. This isn't real." Repeated it like a mantra, over and over, trying to hold onto reality. At 3 a.m., everything stopped. Total silence, even the storm quieted. I gasped for air, crying, bleeding, shaking. Then I heard my own voice, calm and reasonable. "Jake, it's okay. You can come out now, the fog's clearing, it's safe." My voice, but I wasn't speaking. "Jake Morrison, exit the building. Resume normal duties." Too formal, too precise. Wrong cadence, wrong rhythm. It couldn't mimic me properly because I was still here, still alive, still conscious. It could copy the dead perfectly because they weren't around to contradict it. But I was here, and my presence broke its illusion. "You're not me," I said. "You'll never be me." A window imploded. Safety glass sprayed across the room. Wind and snow rushed in, and with them came something else. A shape pulled itself through the broken window, tall and dark and wrong. I raised the flare gun and fired. The flare hit its center mass. The entity shrieked, a sound that wasn't quite sound, that bypassed my ears and stabbed directly into my brain. It retreated through the window, falling back into the storm. I grabbed furniture, started barricading the broken window. Desk, chairs, anything I could move. Shapes pressed against the other windows now, testing, probing, but not breaking through. The flare had hurt one of them and they were cautious now. I lit more flares, threw them out into the yard, created a perimeter of red light that pushed them back. 4 a.m. First hint of dawn, sky lightening from black to dark gray. The shapes at the windows backed away. 4:30. Definite light now, sun still below the horizon but coming. The entities retreated to the tree line. I could see them there, tall shadows in the snow, watching. 4:47. Sun broke over the eastern ridge, golden light spilling across the white landscape. The entities were gone, melted into the forest like smoke. I collapsed on the floor, hypothermic, bleeding from nose and ears. The broken window had let in so much cold that frost covered everything, including me. I crawled to the satellite phone and called HQ. Monica answered, her voice tight with worry. "Jake, your scheduled check-in was 3 hours ago. We were about to send a helicopter." I could barely speak. "Station damaged, window broken, need supplies when roads clear." "Are you hurt? Do you need immediate evacuation?" I looked around at the destroyed room, at the claw marks and blood and frost. "I'm still here," I managed. "I'm okay." I wasn't okay, but I was alive. Monica coordinated an emergency supply drop. Helicopter came at noon, couldn't land in the snow but lowered supplies on a winch. The pilot looked at the damaged station through his windscreen and shook his head. That night I boarded up the broken window with plywood, cleaned up the damage, documented everything in my journal. Updated the rules, added a note. During major storms, entities can approach closer. Light barrier less effective in heavy precipitation. Multiple flares needed. They can be hurt by direct flare impact. 3 months and 1 week to go. I'd survived the worst assault yet. But I knew they'd try again. They always did. Day 60, 2 months exactly. I'd repaired the window, reinforced the station, expanded my flare perimeter system, turned the place into a fortress, as much as a prefab building in the wilderness could be fortified. More importantly, I'd changed. Wasn't the same broken cop who'd driven up that mountain road 2 months ago. Wasn't running from Danny's death and Emily's departure anymore. I was doing something that mattered, something real. Protecting a boundary most people didn't know existed. HQ called at 3 p.m., Monica's voice. "Jake, got some news. Your replacement got delayed. Roads are still bad from that storm system, and now there's another one moving in. We can emergency evac you if you want. Helicopter can be there in 2 hours." I looked around the station, at the rules card on the desk, at my journal filled with observations and discoveries, at the flare system I'd built. "No," I said, "I'll stay, job's not done." "You sure? You've had a rough rotation, tougher than most. No shame in accepting relief." "I'm sure, I understand now." "Understand what?" "Why the rules exist, why someone has to be here." She was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret said you'd get it, not many do." "You've talked to Margaret." "She calls sometimes, checks on whoever's at Cascade Station. She feels responsible, I think, like she started something by documenting what she found. She helped me survive." "I'm glad. You're doing good work up there, Jake, better than you know." After we hung up, I spent the evening updating my documentation. Not just the journal anymore, but a complete guide. Everything I'd learned, every tactic that worked, every mistake that nearly killed me. I rewrote Rule 7 completely. Rule 7. If you hear children's voices singing at dawn, you are not alone in the station. Leave immediately through the east door. Do not look back. Do not try to help. Do not try to see what's singing. Exit and do not return until full daylight. Added detailed notes to each rule. Context, examples, warning signs. Created a second document titled, "What I Learned Read After Your First Week." In it, I included everything Margaret had taught me, everything I'd discovered. They're intelligent, not mindless. They test constantly looking for mistakes, follow rules exactly, no exceptions or creativity. Dawn is absolute safety. They cannot enter the station without a rule violation. Flare light repels them. Direct flare impact can hurt them. Stay calm, fear makes them stronger. They can mimic perfectly but struggle with recent information. They're bound by their own rules, their own laws. The boundary goes both ways. Day 75, my replacement finally arrived. Chris Martinez, 26 years old, former Marine, confident, skeptical. I watched him climb out of his truck and recognized myself from 3 months ago. Young, cocky, certain he could handle anything because he'd survived Afghanistan. I handed him the laminated rule card. Read these, memorize them. Your life depends on it. He laughed. Come on, man, it's just wilderness. I've survived Kandahar. How bad can some mountains be? I grabbed his arm hard enough to make him pay attention. This isn't Afghanistan. This is older. This is worse. The enemy you know is safer than the enemy you don't understand. His smile faded when he saw my face. I'd lost 15 pounds, had circles under my eyes, scars on my hands from defensive wounds. Looked like I'd aged 5 years in 3 months. You're serious. Deadly serious. I showed him everything. The claw marks on the door, the photos I'd taken during Code Vermilion, the journals from previous rangers, Margaret's hidden notebook, my own detailed documentation. He read it all, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern to fear. What are they? He asked finally. I don't know. Margaret didn't know. Maybe nobody knows. Maybe we're not meant to know. But you've seen them. Once clearly, several times partially, enough to know they're real, enough to know the rules work. Chris walked to the window, looked out at the forest. Have you tried to communicate, to understand what they want? No, and you won't either. Margaret told me not to try, and she was right. We're not equipped to understand what they are or what they want. We're just equipped to survive them. By following rules we don't understand. Exactly. He turned back to me. How do I contact you if? You don't, you call HQ. You follow the rules. You document what you learn, you survive. Then you pass it on to the next person. I packed my bags while Chris explored the station, processing everything I'd told him. Watched him check the flare system, read the rules again, test the satellite phone. He was smart, careful, better than I'd been at first. He'd probably make it. At sunset, I loaded my truck. Chris stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the station lights. Jake, thank you for being honest, for not letting me walk into this blind. Follow the rules. Check the rain gauge every morning. Light flares during Code Vermilion. Don't try to be a hero. What if I find something new, something that's not in the rules? Document it, add to the guide, make it better for whoever comes next. That's the job, not just surviving but protecting the next person. I drove down the mountain as darkness fell, watching the station shrink in my rearview mirror. Saw Chris close the door, turn on the lights. One person alone in the wilderness, holding the line against something ancient and hungry. I understood that now, understood why the rules mattered, why someone had to be there. The world was bigger than most people knew. There were thin places, boundary zones, areas where the walls between realities wore thin, and someone had to guard those boundaries. Someone had to know the rules. Someone had to survive to pass on the knowledge. That was the real job, not maintaining trails or helping hikers or monitoring weather. Protecting the boundary, preserving the knowledge, keeping the chain unbroken. I drove back to Seattle, back to my apartment. Tried to return to normal life. It didn't work. Normal people talking about normal things, jobs and relationships and TV shows and politics. None of it seemed real anymore. None of it seemed important. I'd seen too much, knew too much. At night I dreamed about Eagle Peak, about shapes in the fog, about voices calling my name. Sometimes I woke up at 3 a.m., listening, waiting for the scratching to start. 6 months after I left Cascade Station, I got an email from Chris. Made it 4 months, following rules, had 3 Code Vermilions. You were right about everything. Thank you for the guide. Updated it with new observations, sending to you as backup. I read his additions. He discovered that the entities were more active during certain moon phases, that they seemed to avoid areas with running water, That electromagnetic equipment malfunctioned during Code Vermilion events. Good intel, I filed it carefully. 2 weeks later, another email. Requested early transfer. It's getting worse. Activity increasing. New ranger arrives next month. We'll brief them properly. But Jake, they're adapting, learning faster. The rules still work, but they're finding edges, testing boundaries. I don't think I can last much longer. I understood. Everyone had their limit. That night, Monica called my personal phone. Jake, it's Monica from HQ. Chris is transferring out. We need someone at Cascade Station, someone with experience. The new hire backed out after the briefing, said it sounded too dangerous. Can you come back? I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd tried to rebuild, at the normalcy I tried to reclaim. It felt hollow, empty, like acting in a play where I'd forgotten my lines. When do you need me? How soon can you be there? I started packing that night. Didn't bring much. Just the essentials plus my copies of all the documentation, all the rules, all the knowledge accumulated over decades. 3 days later, I was driving back up that mountain road. GPS died at mile marker 47, same as before. Pulled into the clearing at sunset. Chris was waiting, bags already packed, truck pointed toward the exit. He looked like I'd felt after 3 months, exhausted, haunted, changed. You came back, he said. Someone has to. Why you? I thought about that, about Danny and Emily and all the ways my life had broken, about finding purpose in the last place I expected. Because I understand what we're protecting, because I know the rules, because, I paused, because some jobs choose you, this one chose me. Chris nodded slowly, updated the documentation, added everything I learned. Good luck, Jake. Same to you, get some rest, try to go back to normal. Is that possible after this? No, but you can try. He drove away, taillights disappearing down the mountain. I carried my bags inside, did a complete check of the station. Chris had maintained it well, added some improvements, expanded the flare system, reinforced the vulnerable points. I pulled out the rule card, read it for the 100th time. Checked the rain gauge just out of habit, normal reading. Made dinner, settled in for the night. At 3 a.m. I heard it, footsteps in the forest just beyond the clearing. They knew I was back. I didn't go to the window, didn't acknowledge them, just sat at the desk, reading the journals, adding my own notes. Updating the rules with what Chris had learned, what I'd learned, making it better, clearer, more complete for whoever came next. Because that was the job, not just surviving but preserving knowledge, protecting the boundary, holding the line. I thought about Margaret, starting this chain of documentation in 1987, about Tom Patterson and David Cole and Sarah Chen, and all the others who'd survived long enough to pass on what they'd learned. About the ones who hadn't survived, whose discoveries came at the cost of their lives. This was bigger than any one person. It was a relay race across decades, each runner passing the torch to the next. Knowledge accumulating, rules refining, understanding deepening. And I was part of that chain now, not just surviving but contributing, making it safer for whoever came after. The footsteps faded back into the forest, testing me, learning my patterns. Let them learn. I had my own patterns now, my own defenses, my own understanding. At dawn, birds sang. I checked the rain gauge, made coffee, called Monica for my morning check-in. Jake, that really you back at Cascade? Yeah, Monica, it's me. Welcome home. Home, strange word for a place haunted by entities from beyond reality, for a station surrounded by rules that kept ancient things at bay. But in a way, she was right. This was where I belonged now, where my skills mattered, where my knowledge could save lives. Out here on the boundary between worlds, keeping watch, following rules, surviving. So others wouldn't have to. so the knowledge wouldn't be lost, so the line would hold. I looked out at the forest, at Eagle Peak rising against the morning sky. Somewhere out there, in the spaces between trees, in the thin places where realities touched, they watched and waited. Patient as mountains, hungry as winter, bound by rules as ancient as the earth itself. And I would be here day after day, night after night, following protocols, maintaining boundaries, adding my observations to the long chain of knowledge. Until my replacement came. Until I passed the torch. Until the next guardian took up the watch. The cycle continued. It always had. It always would. Some places needed guardians. Some boundaries needed watchers. Some rules needed keepers. I was home. And the mountains remembered.